I go so far as to argue that the thought process that allows me to accept a scientific theory is the same as the thought process required to accept and evaluate the Islamic paradigm, an Islamic view of the world. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we've done with chapter 2. Now we are going to chapter 3. Chapter 3 is the Islamic paradigm, and that's quite exciting because that's one of the main arguments I'm trying to push forward, is that you can see religion, you can see Islam as a paradigm, as a worldview, like lenses through which you see and you experience the world. So here, the Islamic paradigm. So in this chapter, I explore the common element between science and religion in order to justify, using a scientific rationale, the Islamic worldview, which I call then the Islamic paradigm. The first step in this discussion is for me to define what a scientific paradigm is and what are its implications. Like, you have to understand how it works and its limitations. In brief, a scientific paradigm is to see the world through scientific lenses, like glasses. To live in a scientific paradigm is to live in a world that is primarily informed by science. And accordingly, as science evolves, the paradigm also evolves. The lenses through which you see the world evolve as well. So here, I'm taking this idea of paradigms directly from Kuhn, Thomas Kuhn. But I must justify, I'm not taking the full definition of Thomas Kuhn's paradigm, scientific paradigms. Why? Because Thomas Kuhn's, although I appreciate him a lot, I see limitations to his definitions of paradigms, one of which is this incommensurability of paradigms, meaning that if you live within a paradigm, you live within a certain set of values, you have a hierarchy of values, which forbids you to understand or even to negotiate, to discuss with someone who lives in another paradigm. It's like if you live in separate paradigms, there's no way for you to communicate. That's what he's alluding to. He doesn't ascribe himself, Thomas Kuhn, to an absolute incommensurability of paradigms, but he has been criticized for that. Which is funny as an anecdote. When you read the Quran, for example, and you hear or you read the debate between Ibrahim alayhi salam and Nimrod, and Nimrod asked, like, okay, who is your God? And Ibrahim alayhi salam, he's like, yes, my God is the one who created the earth and the heavens and so on and so forth. He gives life, he gives death, and Nimrod is like, I'm giving life and death too. I can kill people and I can let others live. And then Ibrahim alayhi salam say, yeah, but my God bring the sun from the east. Try to make it come from the west then. And Nimrod is left stupefied or without any words, not understanding what's happening. And that verse, that reaction of Nimrod towards the argument of Ibrahim alayhi salam, for me shows that they live in two different paradigms. It's like they become unable to communicate with one another at a certain point. But again, this incommensurability for me is not absolute. There's always a common ground. The Quran, the religion always bring a common ground. Why? Because it needs to be able to bring people from another faith into Islam. So that's one example of limitation I see in Kuhn's definitions of paradigm. So continuing, so in other words, the current scientific paradigms are governed by scientific theories that are currently held to be true. For example, we believe that we live in a heliocentric universe. Like we believe that the sun is at the center and the earth rotates around. Like heliocentrism is a theory. And because we believe in it, we accept it, then you start seeing the world through it and you start experiencing the world through it. Like when I look at the sun every day in the sky, even though I see the sun moving in the sky and I don't feel myself moving, I will explain what I see as, okay, the sun is fixed and it's me who turns around. It becomes natural, it becomes intuitive, like you reshape intuition. So as soon as you accept the theory, then you start seeing through the theory. But one is not bound to live by science. So for example, religiously oriented people live instead according to a religious paradigm. That's what I'm trying to argue here. You can have religious paradigms. And while scientific paradigms are informed by scientific theories, religious paradigms are informed, at least for the Abrahamic religion like Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they are informed by revelation. The goal of this chapter is then to compare the establishment and thus the validity of each of these paradigms. And here validity, I'm validating paradigms based on scientific criteria. That's a bit dangerous. Why? Because I just want to argue that if you accept science as a paradigm, there's no reason why you cannot accept Islam as another paradigm. I don't want to give science the credentials, the power to decide whether a religion is true or not. But I'm trying to argue that if you accept one, you cannot refuse the other one. Why? Because the ground on which you accept one are the same for which you can accept the other one. Like the thought process that goes through when you accept a scientific theory, I show that it's the same thought process, maybe not exactly, but quite strikingly similar steps to accept a religious paradigm. So if you go through one and you accept it, you cannot just dismiss the other because they are the same steps. So the goal is not to discredit one in favor of the other. Like I don't want to say science is false, let's stick with religion. No, because I don't necessarily see them as mutually exclusive. But I want to highlight the similarities between the two. And here, again, I admit, while scientific theories are man-made, they are man-made explanations of the observed phenomena. Religion is based on revelation. The source is different, all right, but the process you go through to accept one or the other is the same. But even if the production of knowledge of the two, science and religion, differs, they both, religion and science, try to make sense of the same world. They both help to explain human presence on Earth, and they both help to explain and interpret events that are taking place in our life. On one hand, natural sciences enlighten about the mechanisms of life and allow one to anticipate the material consequences of one's action. Religion, on the other hand, describes the immaterial consequences of one's actions. These are in general, they are not absolute again. In general, science deals with material consequences, religion deals with spiritual, immaterial, metaphysical, if you want, consequences. So in this regard, both science and religion guides one's decision. Here I present them as being separated, but it's like you can imagine two areas. One is the scientific realm, the other one is the religious realm. They still have an overlap, which I found fascinating. But they still have an overlap. But broadly, science deals with the material, religion deals with the metaphysical. It's like science explains you how it works, and religion tells you why it should work in such a way. So in this regard, both science and religion guides one's decisions. Furthermore, once the scientist has established his theory based on observation, and once the theologian has established his understanding of the revealed text, the methodologies and conditions for accepting either one worldview or the other are intrinsically similar, strikingly similar, I would say. I go so far as to argue that the thought process that allows me to accept a scientific theory is the same as the thought process required to accept and evaluate the Islamic paradigm, an Islamic view of the world. It is therefore in light of these common elements that I evaluate both Islamic paradigm as the same way as I would evaluate any other scientific theory. Why am I doing so? Because too often religion is criticized for things that science does anyway. It's like religion is criticized for promoting counterintuitive ideas. But science does the same. It promotes counterintuitive ideas. As long as you have evidences for each, it becomes rational to accept both of them. Same like science or scientific people, non-believers, would typically accuse religion for being irrational, outdated. But that rationality, if I can phrase it differently, the thought process you go through when you accept one, for me, are the same than for accepting the other. The thought process you go through to accept science is the same that you use to accept religion, and Islam specifically. I thus begin this chapter by enumerating the core criteria used to establish a scientific paradigm, and more specifically a scientific theory. And here I put three broad criteria: its origin, its relevance, and its benefits, the benefits you derive from applying the theory. Then I pursue with an evaluation of Islam according to the same scientific rationale, like what's the origin, the relevance, and the benefits you can derive from it. I would say obviously you can have other criteria like accuracy, beauty, simplicity, but these, I would say, fit within these broad criteria of like relevance and benefits. So the origin, relevance, benefits, you can see them as broad criteria that you can divide with you can subdivide. And I will repeat myself, but I think it's an important point. I'm not trying to use science to prove religion. I don't want to give the power to science to validate or refute religion. It can't. It shouldn't. But I show that the reason why you accept science are the same reasons you use to accept religion. So if you go through and you accept certain scientific theory to be true, or as close as truth as it can be, then you cannot just reject, dismiss religion because they're based on a similar ground. I might even go to say they're based on the same ground. The origin is different, we'll go through later. But the thought process is strikingly similar. وجزاك الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.